Hello, amplifiers. One of the coolest things I get to do is get to talk with other amplifiers in the world who are making a difference. They're using their unique gifts and their passion to amplify others. And I'm really excited because today I've got someone who's not just a professional and knows like numbers, he also knows how to work with creatives. And that is a different mindset. A lot of people who are tuned into growth amplifiers have different backgrounds and we all have different skill sets. But while we have different skill sets, we also have things that we don't do as well. Sometimes it's the creative space. There are people in the financial space that don't really get to flex their creative muscles. But sometimes the creatives don't flex their financial numbers and muscles. And if they don't do that, what does that lead us to? It can lead us right into a wall. So our guest today is the author Profit First for Creatives. And he's really helping people amplify their business. And I'm excited to have him on. Christian Brim, welcome to Growth Amplifiers.
Thank you very much. You were talking about starting with a joke about a rabbi. My business coach is actually an ex-Orthodox rabbi. So I'm sure we can go down that rabbit hole if you want.
All right. So let's get it kicked off. Woo! Now, I'm actually really curious that you've got this background, you've got a passion yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to coming into being in Profit First and then really niching in creatives? What led you to make that decision? Because not everyone wants to connect those two dots, but I think it's like chocolate and peanut butter. And I'm excited to hear that little journey.
Yeah, well, I mean, my origin story starts with my family having a family business when I was growing up. And I go into detail in the book about the background, but the highlight is that at age 16, the business went bankrupt and the family scattered. And that was very traumatic for me. And it led to this desire to help businesses with their finances because I believed that it didn't have to turn out the way it did for my family. And the impact that it had on family relationships. So fast forward, how did we connect that with creatives? You know, a few years ago, I was told by Perry Marshall, author of 80/20 Marketing and Sales. I was at a roundtable with him and he said, well, you know, Christian, you're an artist. And at age 50, I kind of took umbrage with that. I'm like, I'm not an artist. But the way he defined it as being an entrepreneur driven by passion, I kind of agreed with him. And that kind of led on this journey. We started trying to niche in our company. The tip that I would give is the thing that I failed. One of the things I failed at most is I went a long time in my business without having a properly defined target market. And I thought I did, but I didn't. But we went through this extensive MBA type evaluation of our clients. I'm saying that tongue in cheek. We asked two questions. We said, who do we like working with? And who values what we do of all of our existing clients? And when the team came back, there were over half that were in creative industries. And so that was 2 years ago. And so we've leaned into it and it's been a fascinating journey that's evolving. I mean, like it led me to write the book, Profit First for Creatives, starting that last year and releasing it this year. And it also led me to start a podcast, The Profitable Creative. So it's, you know, I think the core message of my book is that profitability and creativity are intertwined. They're not opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think that the problem is you have a certain bent. You either think creatively or you think analytically. But as you mentioned, the magic is when you can get the two to work together. And so, you know, just as accountants need to learn how to be more creative, creatives need to learn how to be analytical to be successful.
I will second that. One of my background, my first passion was playing music. So
Mm.
hence hence the brand names Rock My Image and Growth Amplifiers has that tie into the music. But what I didn't know is the business part of
Right.
being a musician, and I almost ran into the same fate when jumping ship from the advertising agency I was working for over a decade ago to be a web designer. Again, I knew the trade, but I didn't know all the business. So it's taken time. I also share that passion with you, which is one of the things behind Growth Amplifiers, is to make sure that people have the they're able to turn up the volume where they need so that they can be successful. Because if you're missing one side or the other, you can run into challenges. Now, question
Mhm.
for you, my friend. You mentioned that one of the things that kind of it took a little bit longer on your journey that if you could go back, you might do different would be really knowing your niche. And I know that's a
Yes.
big challenge for a lot of people in the space to say, well, who is my niche? I don't know. And we can help anyone, we can help everyone. What do you tell people who are thinking like that now based on what you've learned and why they may want to rethink that position?
I am a very my characteristic, one of my core characteristics is I'm very stubborn or tenacious, depending upon how you want to put it in context, right? And
Thank you.
so I think that the reason why I resisted having a target market for so long was probably this underlying fear that I was going to limit myself, right? I was going to limit the growth potential. And I realized that the exact opposite is true. I think what drove that was a frustration of marketing because it's real hard to differentiate yourself and speak to your target market if you don't have it narrowly defined. I think originally our target market was businesses between a million and 5 million in revenue and like 2 to 10 employees that wanted to grow. Okay, great. How do you market that? Well, you have to be very general because you're talking to everybody that fits that category, which is millions of businesses. So, when you narrow it down and you can speak to the specific need of the target market, then your marketing and advertising becomes much easier. I talk about in the book that for me, we want to be a star company, which is defined by Richard Koch, one of the Koch brothers, as a business that has 10% market share and is growing at 10% per year. Well, growing 10% per year for most businesses isn't like a great challenge, but 10% market share is. And the trick is to get the target market big enough that you can get 10% and still grow at 10%, but not any bigger. So we defined it initially as creative industries, so things like videography, cinematography, and marketing agencies. We may have to niche it even further. It may be that we have to tighten it up. Don't know yet, and go into just one vertical.
So I think that is helpful. What I like to tell people who are wrestling around with that, they know that the benefit of it is you can niche your marketing without having to fully niche your business operations, as
Sure.
you're aware. And but people sometimes hear niching or niching, and they think, I don't want to only serve that one. I could already have clients in other fields. I could help them. So it's you can serve more than the people you're reaching out to, which I'm sure you're aware of. Now, when you're growing, if you're going to get to that 10% market share, how do you foresee being able to do that effectively? A lot of times, people, when they're offering sort of advisory service or they're guiding other people towards transformation, they have trouble with scaling.
Mhm.
What is your path with or plan, I should say, towards how you intend to scale your business and grow it that might overcome some of those scaling limitations?
That's a great question. And personally, I prefer niche just because it sounds smarter. I don't really know what the correct pronunciation is. I think at the core, you have to have uh, alignment between the product market alignment. That's the MBA term. But you have to have alignment of what your solution is to the market's problem. And if you don't, fundamentally, you can't scale. So we just went through last quarter retooling our service offerings and adding things. We didn't take anything from them, but we added to them to help us more align with what we were seeing in the marketplace. I don't know that we've got it figured out yet, and it probably will continue to evolve. But I think that's the fundamental building block for scaling. Yes, you need processes. Yes, you need repeatable outcomes, but it starts with knowing that what the solution you bring to the table is a complete answer to the problem.
Speaking of which, so people in the creative space, you have got a podcast, which is great. I'm a big fan of podcasts, obviously. But it's a great way to have conversations, interact with people, build relationships. Now, when you're talking to creatives, and sometimes, as we've talked about earlier, they can hear numbers and it's can hear they don't want to even look at the numbers. Sometimes it's telling a scary story they just don't want to look at.
Mhm.
How do you help them to get over that fear factor and maybe engage with them so that they start getting comfortable and begin uh, improving? So, like maybe it's they could start implementing profit first, or they you can plant the seed of what becomes possible for them if they develop that analytical mind and strengthen those financial muscles.
Well, I think the first thing anybody needs is the willingness to grow personally, right? And get outside of your comfort zone. Liken accounting to a language. People find out that I'm an accountant and they're like, oh, you must be good with numbers. And I'm like, oh, the accounting that I do uses arithmetic as its highest math. And I learned that in second grade. So, no, it's not complicated. It's really the language of business. And I think the way we approach it is the language tells a story and it tells a story about your business. And I think that's easier for creative minded people to get their brain around. It's a story. It's an interesting thing. Like we had our leadership quarterly last week, and we decided that as a company, we needed to engage our team members more creatively. And there's four of us sitting in this room, and they're all, analytical accountant types. And my head of client service, she said, well, I'm not creative. And I'm like, no, absolutely you are. You dance. And she's like, well, yeah, but I haven't done that in a while. But that doesn't mean that you're not creative. You just, right. And then my CFO says, well, I'm not creative. And my head of client services piped up and she goes, oh, yes, you are. You're a drummer. You're right. And so I think everybody is both, right? They may be more comfortable in one than the other, but it's about having the discipline to get outside of your comfort zone and learn a little more. Flex those muscles, as you said.
Yes, getting out of the comfort zone. So that's a great point. So if you're tuned in, think about that for a moment. Think about how maybe there's something that you know that you could probably do better at, but maybe you've just been avoiding it for one reason or another. It's out of your comfort zone. What is, ask yourself the question, what is something that I can challenge myself just a little bit to get out of my comfort zone? Because when we challenge ourselves, that's how we grow.
Yes.
If if we're too comfortable, we might be doing okay, but we're probably limited with
Yes.
growth.
Yes.
Awesome, my friend. So if creatives are tuned in, if creatives are listening in and they're like, right, so maybe I need to improve in this area, and they know that you wrote this book, Profit First for Creatives. Where could they go, and what's something that they could do to begin taking a first step
Sure.
towards strengthening those muscles?
Sure. Well, the best way to find me, the book, the podcast is my website, christianbrim.com. All my social handles, all that's on there. Some not so beautiful pictures. As I told you, I have a face for radio. In as far as implementing, the easiest thing to see the potential, it's a very easy exercise to see the potential of profit first and the potential of profit in your business is to set up a separate savings account and put just 1% of all your deposits into that account. So every time you deposit money, just take 1% and put it in that savings account. And don't look at it for 13 weeks, for a quarter, 3 months, however you want to define it. And you're going to be surprised at how much is in that account at the end of the quarter. It's not going to be a lot of money, but you're going to be surprised how just taking 1% off the top, it's easy. You're not going to miss it. And it shows you the potential of what you could do.
1%. Start with one. It's one thing you could do, 1%. And what we say at Growth Amplifiers, it's not enough to know this information. We got to put ideas into action. And
Yes.
so challenge yourself. If you're not doing something like this now, challenge yourself to take that idea and try it. Give it a try. So really cool stuff. Now you've got this great book, Profit First for Creatives, and that is definitely something we would want people to check out if they haven't really figured out about Profit First yet and want to learn a little bit more. But you probably have also read other books on your journey too. Is there another book or resource that you've tapped into that you might share with listeners that they can consider to learn and stretch their muscles?
Yeah, I am an avid reader. I read too much. My wife says I can't buy any more books. I probably the one of the foundational books for me on my journey was Traction by Gino Wickman, the
Hmm.
entrepreneurial operating system. Our business was at a point where we needed some structure that we didn't have. I don't know that it's necessary for all businesses, but it certainly applies to all businesses. And I think that anybody at any point in the journey could benefit from reading it. But the second book I would recommend, just from a mindset standpoint,
Hmm.
is Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read that at a very young age, and it really challenged me to think about how I think about money. So those are my two recommendations.
Thank you. So now that you're tuned in, people, you've got several different things you could do. So pick one and put it into action. If you haven't stretched your analytical mind in a bit, definitely those books are good to check out. The Profit First for Creatives, good to check out. And the General Profit First, if you're not a creative, is also a good book as well. And if you need to stretch your creative mindset, find something that will help you do that. Stretch your mind. That's the call to action for this podcast interview. And as a one parting thought, one of the traditions we have at Growth Amplifiers is if you could share a life tip, something that you've learned on your journey that might be helpful for others on theirs. It can be related to what you do in your profession, or it could just be anything that you've learned that would be helpful for others to hear.
I think the biggest thing that I learned is to beware the power of self deception. The ability of your mind to tell you what you want to hear and keep you safe. Your mind is hardwired to protect you, and that's a good thing. But it also doesn't serve you in a lot of capacity. And one of those is to grow, both personally and professionally and in business. And it's all intertwined. You'll reach a point where you can't grow your business if you don't grow yourself. And you know that your mind works against you in that, and just be aware of it.
Thank you kindly. What a great point to hear, because it really is the probably biggest thing that hold us back is ourselves, and we are like Jedi mind ninjas to ourselves. We're like,
Mhm.
you don't want to do the thing you need to. Okay, I don't want to do that.
Yes.
And then later we're like, why didn't I do it? Because
Yeah.
you Jedi mind yourself.
Yes.
All right, my friends, it's been really awesome. Thank you, Christian. What a great conversation. What an awesome person making a difference in the world. Great amplifier. If you're tuned in, make sure to share your thoughts, your comments. We'd love to hear your takeaways and make sure that you're taking new actions to achieve your results. Until next time, thank you, Christian. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And keep on amplifying. To show your support, take a moment to amplify this message by sharing it online. To connect with me or gain more business growth insights, visit www.growthamplifiers.com. Thank you for your support.